Okay, welcome again. So up to this point, we talked about the complementarity of the correlational research and experimental research. But no matter what sort of research we use, we have similar data collection techniques, which determines the nature of our data. One very often used research collection tool or data collection tool is the self-reports that people report how they feel, think, and behave. These can include written questionnaires, verbal interviews, or diaries. Diaries are especially used in relationship research because by using diary methodology, we can collect data for a long period of time on daily basis. That's why it's called a diary. So a typical diary study would last about 7 days, a week, or a couple of weeks. And on each day, the couples are required to fill out certain questionnaires or answer some questions or fill out some scales. And we can thereby observe the day-to-day changes in the feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of couples in their relationships. No matter how clearly we state the questions in our self-report tools, we have a basic problem. The problem is that we cannot control how the participants will perceive or interpret these questions. Even a very simple phrase such as sexual behavior, for instance, can be understood in very different ways by different people. Some people can understand only kissing out of sexual behavior, whereas some other people can understand it as petting or masturbating, whereas some others can understand that sexual behavior is having sexual intercourse. So we cannot control who understands the phrase in which way. And although participants can understand the questions as we intend, as intended, there might be two specific problems. One, they might lack insight. For instance, they might lack insight, meaning they might not know how they are truthfully, accurately feeling about, or how they are thinking on, or how they are behaving in their daily lives. When we ask self-reports, we want people to report from their memories, okay? They have to remember what they used to experience, but memory is biased. So they may not know themselves accurately, and their answers can be biased in that way. As an example, she can believe, a woman, for instance, can believe physical attractiveness is unimportant, and she can rate this on the scale as physical attractiveness is unimportant for me in starting a relationship. But in experimental speed dating studies, she might be attracted to the physically attractive man, okay? So that's one of the problems, lack of insight. People might not know themselves accurately. The second problem associated with self-reports is that they might misremember their past. For instance, when in a specific research, when divorced people were asked about the exact date of their divorce, 50% of them cannot report it. So this is a very simple fact, a very important memory event in one's life, but even this date cannot be remembered. So they might misremember their past. Therefore, self-reports are open to measurement errors. And finally, the responses in self-report measurement can be vulnerable to social desirability bias. What is social desirability? When we ask especially sensitive questions to people about their sexual preferences, about their relationship issues, they might wish to present themselves in a desirable manner in their answers, in a likable manner. So this would bias the results of our studies. So that's the basic problem with self-reports. Another methodology that we can use in relationship science is the observations. Basically, we have two types of observations, natural observations and laboratory observations. Natural observations are observations that we conduct in natural settings. So, for instance, we can participate with a married couple at home with them in their natural living space, and we can observe how they are interacting, how they are communicating in this natural setting. The problem is when we are present in a natural setting and when people know that they are being observed, they can change their behaviors just because of our presence. Although we have certain tools to decrease this bias, it cannot be avoided fully. This problem is called the problem of reactivity. If you look at the last lines in the slide, reactivity means that participants can change their usual behaviors knowing that they are being observed. In laboratory observations, we also might have certain amount of reactivity, but they are more controlled than the natural observations, because in the laboratory, the experimenter can set a certain environment and control the independent variable in typical in experiments, or since it's a controlled environment, people might behave in certain ways without any distraction as might be in the natural settings. One specific observational technique we use is called experience sampling method. In experience sampling, participants are provided with a beeper or another device which can signal them. So, for instance, we might use smartphones. We might send short messages or WhatsApp texts to remind them that please report what you are doing now with your partner, let's say, okay? So we don't, the couple is actually in the natural environment, but the experimenter is not present in the natural environment, but sending a signal to the couple starts data collection process. So they start reporting what they do at that specific moment. And they report their feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Thus, researchers can observe random samples of behaviors during the daytime. What they do, how they feel, think, and behave in their relationship contexts at different periods in a given day. So this is a good kind of sampling because we can observe a variety of different variables, both within the couple and across couples who are participating in the study. There are also eye tracking devices. These devices are tiny video cameras which focus on the eye of the person, and they record the eye movements. So by using eye tracking devices, we can record where and how long does the participant look. So suppose there is an exposure to an attractive photograph of a female or a male person, and by using the eye tracking device, we can observe exactly where the person is looking at, whether on the face, the eyes, or the secondary sexual characteristics like the breasts or the shoulders, and so on. And we can also measure the amount of time spent on observing the photograph. For instance, it is possible that more time spent on visually investigating the faces which are attractive. So it's a good device to study attraction. Observations have their shortages. One of them is reactivity, as we talked about it, and the other problem can be the costs of observation. They can be expensive. They might require costly equipment like eye tracking devices and so on. So if you wish to study with observations, it's good to have funding. There are other kinds of measures also. There are physiological measures, for instance. Physiological measures are used to measure the heart rate, muscle tension, brain activity, hormone levels, and especially in terms of sexual arousal or genital arousal. These physiological measures can be placed in the genitals of the people, man and woman, the vagina or the penis, and we can record the arousal level in the genital organs. So they are expensive tools, but they provide valuable data about when and how people are aroused to certain stimuli, especially male or female related stimuli. There are the archival measures that we can use. An archive means previously collected data stored in a database. And the good side, the advantageous side of archival measures is that there is no problem of reactivity. In actual observations, when people know that they are being observed, they can change their behaviors. But archives include data collected before without any reaction. So there's no problem of reactivity. marriage licenses, birth records, and any other kind of written material or online material can be used for observation, which is recorded previously in databases. And as you remember, we talked about marriage and divorce rates across years in the United States and in Turkey. And these marriage and divorce rates are archival data study results, okay? Now, as you might appreciate, we use very different kinds of research methods or techniques. But relationship science contains or consists of questions which might be sensitive when we want to ask the opinions of other people. So it's not easy to study sexual attitudes or preferences or sexual orientation and behaviors of people. It's not always easy to ask these questions face to face or even on self-report paper pencil tests or online. Topics such as virginity, relationship conflict, or relationship problems such as dating and domestic violence, these are all sensitive issues. Now, the question is, are we not going to study these questions scientifically? The answer is, of course, we're going to study with these topics, but we should be a little bit cautious and sensitive in studying these topics. Such topics might contain certain issues that individuals did not think before or do not want to think about or remember or report. So it means when we ask such sensitive questions to our participants, it's possible that they will be annoyed. They will feel psychological or social discomfort about reporting these preferences or behaviors. In these cases, we say that there is more than minimal risk in our research process. What is minimal risk? Minimal risk is the amount of risk that an individual can experience in his or her daily routine, daily life. So, as for virginity, for instance, nobody asks about your virginity while walking along the street, okay? In your daily life, you do not face about such a question most of the time. And once you are asked about this question, of course, not face-to-face, but even on a self-report paper pencil questionnaire, you might feel annoyed about being asked about this specific quality, okay? So you may not want to answer this. You may feel discomfort about it, no matter you might be virgin or non-virgin. Just being asked this question might create tension. So this is a question that you're not going to answer in your daily life, perhaps. So it poses more than minimal risk in your life. And in our studies, in research, there is a general principle that we shouldn't expose the participants to risks which are more than minimal. These risks can be physical, psychological, or social risks. When you are asked such a sensitive question, you might feel stressed just because you remember about yourself. You face or confront your true self, let's say, and this is typical psychological risk. You might feel embarrassed about being asked such a question by a stranger who is the researcher, let's say, and you might experience social risk in this case. There might not be physical risk, perhaps, which contains that some of your body part will get injured. And there might be some cases, if we are perhaps studying violence, for instance, with the couple in a laboratory situation, it's possible that couples might get very angry at each other and they might physically injure each other. There might be more than minimal risk physically as well. So what should we do? Of course, we have to study these topics, but we should ensure that the risk is not more than minimal. And most importantly, participants might be informed in advance before they participate in the study about the possible risks if there are certain risks in the study. Their informed consent must be obtained. Bilgilendirilmiş onam. Rızasını alıyoruz çalışmadan önce. So first, we provide information about what they are going to experience in the study, what kind of research techniques will be used, whether they're going to fill out questionnaires, whether there are some questions which might be disturbing for them, annoying. So they should all know this, and knowing these qualities of the study, they can, by their own free will, decide to participate or not to participate, which is called voluntary participation. So this is especially important in relationship research if specifically we are studying sensitive issues. And the participants must also be informed that they can leave the research anytime if they feel uncomfortable without any penalty. What does that mean? Sometimes we provide some rewards, some bonuses to the participants so that because we use their time and energy to participate in our studies. So we might pay them money, we might give them gifts, and they know that when they participate, they're going to get some money. But we cannot force people to keep on answering the questions knowing that they are expecting a reward. So if the participant says, okay, I'm done here, I want to leave, it's done, he or she can leave, and we have to give the reward, okay? They shouldn't feel embarrassed, they shouldn't feel punished just because they are leaving. So these are ethical principles that we follow in any research, but especially they become important in relationship research. There is one specific example that your textbook provides, which is an example of the United States Department of Health and Human Services education. There are some education programs that Department of Health and Human Services provide for married couples to sustain their marriage. These are called family education programs. And especially low-income couples, as we know, are less likely to marry and more likely to divorce. That's what research pinpoints. So in such kinds of programs, we call people to participate in these education programs, and we want to teach them the low-income couples to value marriage more, okay? But when we study or when we attract unmarried couples who are planning to marry, and if we want to sort of provide them a values education, a character education to value marriage more, the problem is they do not have money to marry. So in such a program, we are making these people aware of their low income status, which might create distress in these people. And it is not, as for the married couples, it is not the marriage skills that is perhaps insufficient in their marriage. Perhaps it's the economical strain they experience. Perhaps they know how to communicate, but the economical problems they're experiencing might be blocking their effective communication with each other. So again, the theoretical background of the program is criticized by the writer of your textbook, the author of your textbook, and this is Miller's idea about such programs. He states as follows: a government program that seeks to improve relationships would probably do better to increase the minimum wage, gündelik wage, gündelik ödenen para, yevmiye, the minimum wage, and to fund childcare and effective training for better jobs than to try to teach people to respect marriage. So before the system, the state or the government provides such education programs, perhaps it's better that people can have better incomes, let's say, so that they don't feel strained in such kind of trainings. Now, that's the American case. What's the Turkish case? In Turkey, the Ministry of Family, Work and Social Services has a similar family education program, which is called Aile Eğitim Programı. This is the website. You may invest. I strongly recommend that you investigate or examine this website, because I believe you might use the contents of this website if you plan to become a family counselor in the future, okay? So there are free PDF copies of textbooks there, which are used in family education program. And that's the website. And in this family education program in Turkey, these two modules are very relevant for our topic here. One is about evlilik ve aile hayatı, and the other is aile yaşam becerileri. This is exactly what is criticized by Miller. Now, I recommend that you download these free PDF copies and read them. I believe they are very carefully prepared by specialists in the field. But I would like you to investigate or examine these modules in terms of the criticisms that Miller raises. So please examine these textbooks and try to figure out whether there are certain ethical problems which might be observed at the time of training using these texts. So this is not an official homework, but it's up to you whether you examine them or not. Now, finally, the last word about the research methods could be how we should interpret and integrate the results of different studies. Now, in couple studies, we have a specific case, which is that we do not treat spouses as individuals. So one spouse here, one spouse here, two individuals. No, that's a system. It's a family system. It's a couple, okay? What does that mean? They are part of the same relationship system and they influence each other, okay? They are not independent. They are interdependent in that relationship. So if we are, for instance, studying about relationship satisfaction, one way to understand Ayşe is that Ayşe is satisfied with her marriage with Ahmet. So Ayşe is considered as an individual here. And similarly, Ahmet can be satisfied with his marriage with Ayşe. So Ahmet is considered here as an individual. But since this is a family system, Ayşe's satisfaction influences Ahmet's satisfaction, and Ahmet's satisfaction influences Ayşe's satisfaction. So this is reciprocal relationship. Therefore, they are interdependent, and especially in such kind of research, when we are studying with couples, we use different statistical techniques, treating them as interdependent, okay? So there are three sources of influence in such kind of a research. Individual source of variation, personality of one spouse, the individual source of variability in the other spouse, and their relationship is the third source, okay? So this is a specific case in relationship science, which should be considered. And finally, we can focus on the generalizability, the general quality of our data observed in various studies. As you very well know, the best way to establish generalizability is replication. We can use similar or different operational definitions in our measurements so that we can measure the same variable in different ways, and if we still observe the same results, the same correlations, the same cause-effect relationships in different experiments, in different correlation or longitudinal research in itself, then we might say that our findings or results are more valid. So replication is an important issue in any scientific endeavor. Another important point or methodology is using multi-method approach. So in multi-method approach, the same research question is investigated by using different methods. So the relationship between marital quality and marital commitment can be studied correlationally. It can be studied experimentally in some manner. And we may use longitudinal research. We may use cross-cultural research. We use different methods to collect data. And if results of different studies using different data converge on very similar or on the same results, then we can be more sure about the validity of our findings. That's what we call multi-method approach. So it's better than using a single approach. And finally, once we replicate different studies, experimental, correlational, whatever, we have a compilation of a set of many studies, hundreds of studies. How can we put them together to say whether we have always the same results on the average? The method that we use, the statistical technique that we use, is called meta-analysis. What we basically do is to combine the findings of different studies statistically and find a single statistical result. If it is a significant result, which means if it is observed beyond chance level, then we can conclude that on the average, many studies converge on the same finding. So replications, multi-method approach, and meta-analyses help to increase our generalizability in our scientific studies. So that's the end of today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, see you next week.